Let's have that conversation now with Joy Nkuna, who's the SASCP Chairperson, who's going to be talking to us about this very subject. Thank you so much for your time. What would you say is considered a healthy mental state?
Good evening, Bongiwe. Good evening to the listeners. I believe a healthy mental state is one where an individual is able to understand themselves as well as increase their ability to engage and pursue what they want to do. A healthy individual is one that is able to give back to the community as well as live within a healthy family setup. For you to be able to reach that point, there needs to be a certain level of understanding of the self as well as the space that you live in.
And what would you say then are some of the indicators of somebody who's not, okay when it comes to their mental state?
There are many indicators that we can observe, given the fact that a human being is very dynamic and there cannot be full uniformity. However, what has happened is we have what we call the DSM, which is a criteria that we look at in terms of diagnosing an individual. So you would have people, for example, that would present with depression. They would have long, persistent low mood. They would have sleeplessness, which we call insomnia, as well as heightened anxiety at times. Then there are individuals that try to cover up those symptoms as well, given how uncomfortable they are. You'd find that the individual can also reach out to using substances. So if it's something that is out of the normality for that individual, especially within our community, that's when we pick it up that our fellow family or our fellow member is not so well, given that they are reaching out to other substances. And the easily accessible ones are alcohol, where you find that generally a lot of people resort to substance abuse with alcohol as well as drugs. Then there are other instances where you find that a person might not be fully aware of their conditions, but the community or the family are able to pick it up that there's something not productive about this person. In that case, you'd find that the family would be the one that would need to assist them to reach out for help.
So, as a country, there's so much happening, not only even in the country, but also in the world, but I'd like to confine it to South Africa. I mean, there's, you log on to social media, there's people that are talking about gender-based violence, there's issues around corruption. Now, we've just spoken about the devastating floods in KwaZulu-Natal, there's now the pandemic as well, and all of this also appears to be contributing to some, who are not healthy, to not be healthy mentally. How much of an impact do these events that we are seeing around us play when it comes to our mental state not being as healthy as it's supposed to be?
They impact a tremendous amount because, all these events that we are talking about, these are events that tend to challenge our understanding and belief structure in terms of what is humanity. This is out of the normal. It's not your everyday life. It's not something that would be happy to sit and have a cup of tea over. Now, when something like this, especially when we're considering the floods that happened in KZN, as well as the pandemic, these are traumatic incidents. There have been family members that have been lost. There's been injuries that have happened. There's loss of property. I'm talking about the floods. Now, not forgetting the pandemic on top of that, people have lost jobs. A sense of well-being and a sense of control is obtained from one having some sort of a career, as well as being able to take care of one's family, even take care of yourself. It gives you a sense of self. Now, when experiencing these out of your normal or out of your natural circumstances, they tend to challenge one's schema in terms of understanding what has just happened to them, as well as how do they incorporate it to survive and cope through it, because this is something that has challenged their understanding. Usually what would happen and what is expected is that person would need to sort out for help. There's been a tremendous call in terms of psychologists getting involved in KZN to help with trauma debriefing with the families that have experienced loss, as well as families that have witnessed what has happened. Trauma debriefing within therapy helps the patient as well as the families to be able to reintegrate as well as to adjust to what has just happened, and sort of find a way of coping through it. So we as psychologists hope to be there not only within curing and addressing the symptoms that are there. We would like to also be there in a preventative measure. And I believe in the past, we generally were not fully in the open or in the public for people to fully know us.
So when we then look at, you've just described people who are directly involved, but also when I've been seeing quite a lot of people on social media saying they're overwhelmed by what they're reading, bad news all the time. How does one practice emotional distancing? I just had a conversation with Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman from Gift of the Givers, who says he's emotionally distant from these situations. Others are seeking an outlet. How do we begin to do this in order to decompress?
All right. Now, there are many methods that one can apply. I mentioned earlier that every individual is unique. However, every individual needs to find a constructive way of dealing with trauma as well as daily challenges. I indicated earlier as well that one of the ways which tend to be very productive is a person seeking out help, going to a clinic, going to get referral to see the psychologist. There are also constructive ways of, for example, what you just mentioned now, of detaching. Now, we've had an overflow of information in the media on a daily basis. Every minute, every second, what you see is horrifying news about what is happening out there. What I've also come to realize is people are also learning to minimize the amount of media that they get exposed to. So I've learned of people that say over weekends, they no longer consume, use anything on the media. They just focus on what is around them, which is family or work or what they have to do. That is a way of coping as well. The other way of coping is to reach out to family and loved ones. Creating a good support structure, which is healthy, allows you to be able to understand that, all right, these are the people that can be there for me. These are the structures that are supportive. We have seen now during the floods in KZN, where South Africa has reached out immensely, giving blankets, giving food, giving what they can give to the people that have lost a lot. And that is another support structure, reaching out to the community. We need to remember that as we always say, we are not an island. And in the environment that we live in, there's always that one person who can support you. We need to just learn and see who is that one person. And the other method of coping as well is to find a space which is comfortable for you. Sometimes just taking time out, find you, relax, and learn what helps you to cope. Exercising, eating well, sleeping, reading a book. You know, the simple things. So going back to the basics always helps instead of always trying to complicate things.
Find you. That's very, very important because it's something we take for granted. As a final question then, very briefly, there's something that your organization is doing. You're calling for a drive for people to understand the importance of their well-being. And it's important, especially in a time as now. Very briefly, talk to us about how does this work and how do people become part of it?
All right. So I belong to an organization called the South African Society of Clinical Psychologists. We are made up of a group of 8 in the executives, but obviously we have a huge team of psychologists behind us who are out on the ground. We started an initiative on the 28th of April. There was a roundtable discussion where we spoke about drugs and the use and the addiction that goes along with drug use. That helped us to pump up the campaign to start and reach out to the average person on the ground. We understand that certain people in different corners of South Africa might not have access to psychologists, might not have access to counselors, and might not have readily access to doctors who would be able to advise that you're presenting with a mental condition or a condition which is not healthy for you. We have also recognized that using the media, radio, television, WhatsApp, and different mediums, we'll be able to reach out to every single person hopefully every single person in South Africa, to be able to help them and understand the importance of coming back and understanding the individual. We would like the individual to understand themselves and the individual to understand the importance of mental wellness that enables giving back to the community and adequate functioning.
All right.
Psychology as a profession. Yes, ma'am?
Thank you so much, Joy. We're out of time, but thank you. Thank you so much for even those contributions, because I'm sure tonight, as a lot of viewers are watching, they will now know just to rely on some of the things around them as a bit of an outlet. But thank you so much for giving us those insights. That is Joy Nkuna. She is the South African Society of Clinical Psychologists Chairperson.